Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on JTeen's September 2020 webinar. Here today, we have Billy Planner, who's going to inspire and enlighten us about how we can look a little bit differently at our work as Jewish youth professionals. I feel like I've known Billy forever, although we just recently met, but I look forward to continuing our relationship and partnership as he's also now a JTeen member. So Billy Planner, please take it away.
All right. All right, great. Well, it's great to see everybody and great to see some very familiar faces and faces I feel like I've seen my whole life. Down in my bottom left corner, Leanne, over there. So great. I'm happy to be here. I love talking to my fellow youth workers. A field I thought I was going to do right after college for about a year or two and get it out of my system and then move on to what in the 80s I thought was more of a manly field, more of a respectable field. And somehow I'm here in 2020, loving every minute of not leaving that field. And so, just think back for a second as to why we got into this field. What were your dreams and aspirations that made you get into this field? Though, as we talked about right at the beginning here, some of you are second generation in this field. And so you might not have had too many choices except to go into it, but just think about it for a second. Because mine was probably a little unrealistic. After college, I moved to Washington, D.C. to be with all my camp friends. Summer camp, Camp Ramah in New England was everything to me. I remember being on a day off at the John Kennedy Library, laying outside, because if you ever worked at summer camp, by the end of the summer, you don't have any more money to really do anything on your days off with. And so we were just sleeping out in the fields there. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, if I could do this job, camp counselor, for the rest of my life, I would do it. And that's when they reminded me that's called a youth director. And so luckily, when I was graduating from Syracuse University, an old camper of mine came to check out the school, and his father, while we were walking around, said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm moving to DC, your neighborhood." And he said, "Well, I'm president of the synagogue, and we're looking for a youth director. Would you ever think of doing this work?" And I said, "Sure, I would do it." And I got the job, interviewed for the job, got the job. The night before my first day, and this is where the unrealistic expectations came in, I saw the movie Dead Poets Society. So this is 1989. And I just remember sitting there for like 20 minutes after the movie. And I said, that's what I want to be, is that guy. Little I know, Hollywood is Hollywood. In reality, I wish I could have scripted what my kids would say back to me so that I could be inspirational and all that. So what I want to do right now is just go through a few ideas and then get to my story. As I was writing this out and figuring out what I wanted to say, it just made sense to build up to this. And one of the things I tell people who are going into our field is you can be a youth director. I mean, technically, it's not that hard to take kids bowling or take kids on to a movie. I mean, when we could do it. Right now, it is very hard. But when we could do this work, it's not that hard. I always heard it wrong when parents would come up to me after an overnight and say, "My kid had a great time. This is amazing." I was like, well, how hard is that? He's not sleeping at home. She's not at home with you. She's amongst all her friends. Of course, they're having a good time. And so I started to think, though, there is, though, an art and a craft to what we do if you think of it that way. Unfortunately, a lot of people look at it as, oh, you just get to sit on the floor with teenagers and have a really good time. And I think that's such a demeaning statement to the people who do this as an art and craft of it. And so I like to think of us as artists and as artisans of a craft. And also, if I could be anything in the world, I know I said I would be a youth director, but in reality, I would be a rock star. And I would have been really good at it, except I can't sing or play a musical instrument. But in my head, I think I would be a really good Bruce Springsteen. I think I could handle that, and the world would have been better for it. But I started to think, well, my stage then is right in front of these kids. My stage is wherever I'm talking to these kids. Now, as you'll hear more about my business, my stage is that little space by the bus seat on the aisle when I turn around and talk to people on the bus. And so I started looking at it as I am a rock star. My audience is just this group here. And I've often said to our fellow youth workers, who we all have stories about our treatment from our employers to the parents to people who just view our field differently than we do. You got to treat yourself and be the rock star that you think you are and how you should be treated. And so a few of the ways I think that we can think of this as an art and a craft is, as I said before, it's not hard to take kids bowling. It's not hard to take kids to a sports event, but always look deeper at programming. What can we do beyond the expected norm? So, for example, when we would go bowling, we would, before the Super Bowl game, that's what I wanted to say. When everybody's watching the Super Bowl, everybody has these parties. I'll never forget the first time I wasn't a youth director and I went to a Super Bowl party with my adult friends. I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe I've been missing this for this many years, but what we would do is add on an event before where we'd go to a food kitchen and call it a Super Bowl party, SOUPER bowl party. And so just take it a little deeper and push. How much can we push our teens? And that's what I started to think. And I was in my 20s when I began youth work. And it lined up with having a 20-something-year-old ego, too, an ego mentality of, I'm going to push them as far as I can. I will never be in this age bracket where they don't view me as their parent, but view me as just slightly older. And that gives me a little bit of freedom. So how much can we push? And I would also ask, when I was doing programming, I would always ask why. Why are we doing this program? Just because we've always done it is not an answer. But also, in the same manner, I would think, why not? Why not do something different? Why not just have a wild idea? And instead of going, can a youth group do that? I would just ask, why can't we? Let's make it happen. I would get pushback from all my fellow youth directors in the region and in the area going, their first question would always be, why can you do that? Why are you doing that? And I just started thinking, why greet a fantastic idea or creative idea by taking a step back and saying, can I do this? Why not greet it by taking a step forward and saying, why the hell not? I am the rock star. I'll do it. I'll get this thing done. So I think it's really good to have an ego as a youth director and sit there and thinking, y'all are so lucky to be in my youth group right now, and just rock their world. And that's sort of the mentality. But also, after thinking, why not, I would often think, to quote President Jed Bartlett, what's next? What can we do next? Always be growing and expanding and tweaking. Nothing was more boring to me than seeing the same, and especially on the regional level in our youth groups, the same calendar, the same schedule. I get it's great that something works. One of my biggest fears when I would introduce new programming was, well, now we're going to have to keep it on our schedule. It works so well that everybody's going to want it again. Then we got to find slots for new programming because I was dying a little bit every time we would just do the same old programming. I needed to infuse it with the creativity. And this, by the way, is how you get the unhealthy schedule of youth programs almost every weekend, which is what we were doing in the 90s when I was in Atlanta at the time. But what's next? Help create what's next. If you are just doing what is happening now, what is hot now, you're behind the curve. We need to be ahead of the curve and setting where are these kids going? What can be possible in their world? And part of how we do that, I think, and it worked for me, is to do what is of interest to you. Everybody says to me, you know, man, that's the most selfless job you do. You're doing for the kids. And I'm like, really? I think of it as one of the most selfish things I've ever done. We don't really do much that I don't want to do, that's not of interest to me. Because if it's of interest to you, you're going to be excited about it and make it interesting to the kids. I think I'm a pretty interesting guy. And so I want to share what is of interest to me to them. I want to share my piece of my world to them, help them come through the door and see and make it of interest to them. And so this is how I sort of get to my story here is, so I graduated from Syracuse University, home of the Orange, in 1989. And I got the job, as I told you, as a synagogue youth director in Washington, D.C. And then 3 years later, I got called home to my home synagogue to work as a youth director there. And what I realized only much further down the road, in fact, much further down the road, is one of my major philosophies of youth work, which was to go deep with the kids. Really, I learned while I was a senior at Syracuse University. In fact, I can tell you the night. It was December 21st, 1988. It was the night before my 21st birthday, and I, being a good Jewish boy, know that we begin our celebrations the night before the holiday. And so my friends were going to take me to Syracuse. You want to stay inside as much as possible in December. So we went to a basketball game. And after the game, we had heard about a plane crash in Europe. And we also then learned that the plane was brought down by a terrorist bomb, a Libyan terrorist putting a bomb on there. And when the news came on 11, we understood the story was it was Pan Am Flight 103. Some of you may be too young to even remember that, but this plane blew up over Lockerbie, Scotland. And on it was 38 Syracuse students, including my junior year roommate, including a bunch of friends of mine that I would go see music with. And that night, I was really given a gift that played out through my youth work world. And that was understanding that I was connected to people and events that I don't even know about. But I stopped thinking about that as I got into the youth work. But slowly, I started to see, especially in hindsight, I was doing programming that dealt with that issue of getting the kids to understand the importance of understanding connectedness. And there was sort of an unstated agreement between the youth kids and myself, in that if they wanted what they wanted, which was the free time on overnights, the whitewater rafting when we would go on our camping trips, they had to give me what I wanted, which was I would work in 20 to 30-minute discussions with them about current events, about ideas I had that I was playing out in my mind that I wanted to work through with them, or things I wish somebody had told me when I was their age. But there is a fine line, by the way, about making it all about you versus all about them. I was doing work that I was interested in mentally, psychically, karmically, whatever you want to call it, counseling, but on their level. And it's so much so that I loved one time I was walking behind the kids as they were walking towards where we were going to have the discussion on one of our camping trips. And one of my members of the youth group had brought a new friend to the program. And the friend was like, what are we doing? Why do we have to leave what we were doing? And she was explaining to the friend that, we're having this discussion. And the friend was like, this doesn't sound like fun. And the youth group member said, well, it's what we do. We get to do all this, and we do this with him. It's what he likes, but they're actually really good too. So it was a great little compromise there. And I took this up a notch in that with my youth group, we were part of United Synagogue Youth, USY, nationally. And I was in Atlanta, and the region had a Disney day. Every year we would go to Disney World. I was in Atlanta, all of Florida would show up, and it was a way for the kids in Atlanta to see the Florida kids. And I liked it because we got to do a whole Shabbaton where I got to do some really good programming. The Disney Day was the least of what I liked about it, just sitting there. And so at some point, I decided, and this is where the ego kicks in, I wanted to do something that nobody else was doing. I wanted to show my colleagues that we could do, like, if Disney Day were the ultimate, I want to go beyond that because I thought it was the least. How hard is it to buy kids passes to Disneyland or Disney World, let them go for 10 hours and collect them again? I mean, the collecting part may be the hardest part at the end of the day, but how hard is it to do that and call it successful? I mean, you've really got to screw it up for a kid not to like that day, right? So to me, I was like, this is using none of my skills. This is using none of my aspirations. This is using none of my imagination. This is a wasted day for me. And so I ended up doing something. I was like, I'm going to show you how badass I am. I took away their Disney trip and said, I'm going to replace it. I sat my youth group down and said, I'm replacing your Disney day. We can do better and we can do deeper than this. And we're going to replace it with a trip to a different city every year where we're going to explore the history and the culture and the sites of that city. And in fact, I'm actually going to make you have to do research papers to go. You just don't get to go and sign up. You've got to do a project. Luckily, they all agreed. I don't know if I'd be sitting here right now talking to you had they said, no, we're not doing it. I don't know if I would have had the power to, like they're doing in Congress right now, counting the votes. I don't know if I would have had the votes to push this. Luckily, they went for it. And I realized really quickly that that trip to a different city every year, we started with DC, then we did Memphis the second year, and we did the history of rock and roll with the history of the civil rights movement. And everything did have a Jewish component to it, but it didn't dominate the whole thing. I was playing to all of their identity, American and Jewish, and blurring the two, because I'm a day school product. I didn't like the question, the usual Jewish educational question, are you an American Jew or Jewish American? I remember being in fourth grade, the teacher asking and playing that game where you go to one side of the room or the other. And I remember standing in the middle of the room and getting yelled at by my teacher. This was the 70s when the teachers could yell at you. Yelling at me, how dare I not put Jewish as the ultimate. Little honesty to my fellow peers here. Part of it was I wasn't that great with grammar, so I didn't understand which one modified which. But in reality, I was like, well, both are really important. I don't know if I could take away the American and replace it with Canadian or Spaniard and say that I'm the same person. But I also not sure I could replace Jewish with Catholic and say I'm the same person. So I just stood in the middle and got yelled at. But it always stuck with me that what a horrific question. To be honest, what a stupid question. You're both. Why are we trying to unpack that? These kids walk through their whole day with this blend. Why not celebrate that? Why not work at that? And I know, Adam, I know the work you do. Matt, y'all work together? Is that okay? So Matt, the work you do, maybe others here.
And Stephanie.
And Stephanie, all right. Well, at the risk of putting down three of y'all, I'll say this. I knew as a youth director, we were doing a great job of getting our kids to go to Israel. And all too often, I would hear when they come back, loved it, loved being Jewish there, but I'm living here. And I'm like, we're doing a horrific job of making a connection to their physical homeland. 90+% of those kids who go off to Israel are not going to live there. They're going to live here. And we really need to make a connection to America as well. And so quickly I realized I can't be a youth director anymore. If I had to plan a Purim Carnival one more time, it wasn't going to be good for everybody. And I could not, the real thing that got to me was we would have a fantastic year. And then it felt like I had to go right back to the beginning in September and start all over again, recruiting kids to come out. I was like, can't we just start where we ended in May, with that excitement? Why do we have to go back why do I have to talk you into coming to a bowling night? And so I was sitting on a couch one day out of fear and saying, I need to do something else, but I have no idea what else to do. And slowly I started to realize that one weekend trip a year that I do, I really love. And so what would happen if I put that together? I put together a bunch of the cities and put together a 36-day summer trip across America where I took all of my passions. Once again, none of this selfless, all of this completely what I want to do. We are going to engage in history, politics, and activism. We're going to talk to all sides of political issues. We are going to go counter to the culture of America and actually engage in civil discourse. We're going to sit and talk to somebody with the opposite view and talk to them, not demonize, not hate, but talk. And I'm going to challenge, and the name of the program is Etgar, which is challenge, Etgar 36. Another secret thing, I just needed a number. A friend said a number would be really cool. And I wanted the logo to be the interstate sign, the little red and blue sign. So I needed a big number. So the summer trip is 36 days. On the first information night, one of the parents said, I love the double chai of being an American and a Jew. I was like, exactly. That's exactly why I called it that. And then somebody else said the Lamed Vavniks. I was like, exactly. That's exactly why it's called that. So whatever, I'll do whatever you need it to be. Just sign your kid up. And see America and make a connection to each city. What's special, what's unique in each city. So these kids are really just traveling the way I like to travel. So once again, I'm taking what I like and trying to introduce it to teenagers, trying to give them a vocabulary and an entree into their Jewish identity that all too often, I think many of the kids who come on my summer trip hear that they are bad Jews because they don't go to synagogue regularly. And I want to show there's another way, a social justice way, a social activism way. And it's pushing the idea of Sado, of Tikkun Olam, which I think we have killed that word, overdone that word. And it's beyond saying that just making sandwiches is not enough. We need to engage in the issue of hunger. We need to figure out how do we solve the problem, not just take care of it for a day so that we feel really good about ourselves, but how do we engage in the long arc of social justice here? And so I created a nonprofit called Etgar 36. And a lot of people would say, how do you take that risk? That's pretty risky. And I said, really? To me, the bigger risk was not doing something different. So to me, the risk of not taking the leap to start my own business was greater than the risk of staying in the usual, staying in the familiar. I thought I was dying a little bit every day. And if you feel that way, then that's a pretty good sign that you need to shake it up. I'm not saying you have to leave your job, but perhaps rearrange the pictures in your job, like rearrange the pictures in your office or whatever makes you feel different about your office. But rearranging how you plan, coordinate, and think of your programming can change everything, even by adding just one thing a year. That's all I did. I added that one trip. It made all the difference. And so I created the nonprofit Etgar 36 in the summer of 2003. I thought I was going to get 40 Atlanta kids, and it wasn't going to be nationwide. I would just recruit in Atlanta. Fast forward, I ended up with 12 kids from nationwide. Talk about an ego bruise there. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to run it. The worst thing that's going to happen to me, I'm going to lose some money. I'm going to spend money is how I thought about it. And that's the cost, I thought in my head, of never having to ask, what if? What if I had ever done that? That I had 20 years down the road would not be sitting there thinking back, by the way, 20 years later, planning a Purim carnival thinking, what if I had done that idea? That was going to be the cost to me if I lost money on it. I ended up making $1,500 that summer. Good enough for me. I was going to do it again the second summer. Now, talk about a real ego bruise. I got 12 kids the second summer too. And I was like, let me run it. Let me just do it. I want to do it. Third year, by the way, 36 kids. So, you got to hold out there. You got to hold out there. The other thing I want to tell you is, I want to share, is think outside the box. So normally if you start up a Jewish nonprofit, what do? You go fundraise and then you program, right? Then you create your program. Well, at the time, I was dating a woman who was a development director at Federation. So she's explaining to me what goes on. So let's say, Sarah, let's say I'm coming to you. Let's say you've won the lottery and you have the $1 million. I mean, everything, it's the Goldberg JCC, it's the Goldberg Social Hall, it's everything Goldberg. So I'm going to come to you. I know I'm going to ask you for money. And by the way, this is my pitch to you, Sarah. So we'll talk after. But let's say I am coming to you. I'm going to talk to you. You and I are going to dance for a little bit and not talk about the fact that I'm asking you for money. I know I'm asking you for money. You know I'm going to ask you for money, but we're not going to talk about it. And I remember turning to my friends just saying, I can't do that. It's too cheesy for me. I'm going to like start cracking up in the middle of our meeting. And so I just don't know how to do that. Fortunately, after the first summer trip, I got a phone call from a youth director from Santa Cruz. And she was bringing her youth group to do a civil rights trip in the Southeast. And she said that her friend told her, I just ran a summer trip, that the first 3 days were a civil rights trip in the South, were civil rights in the Southeast. Could I talk her through how to plan it? So we're talking, and all of a sudden she goes, well, could you just run this for me and I'll pay you? If you look at my business model plan, my original business plan, nowhere in it does it talk about winter programming. It just talks about growing the summer trip. I was like, sure, I can run the civil rights trip for you. And I ran a 3-day trip and loved it. Kids loved it, and I got paid. And all of a sudden, I realized, Sarah, I could talk to you, but I could also talk to Stephanie, Sharon, Sandy, Susan, Adam, Matt, Sephora. I'll even talk. No, I'm not talking to you. And Erica. You got to be discretion. You can't just take all business, by the way. You got to learn when to say no, and that's an important thing. So I know who to say no to. But Erica, I would talk to all of y'all. I could sell y'all on civil rights trips all day long. And so Etgar 36, so now until March 8th of this year, we were running 55 civil rights trips a year, including, this would have been our 18th summer trip, with no foundational money, no fundraising money. I have individual families and friends and people in Sarah who make donations all the time, but it's so backwards, so much so that I don't even know if it still exists. Erica, you might know. Does Slingshot still exist, the fundraising thing? So they would pick 50 innovative Jewish nonprofits a year. And about 10 years ago or so, we got chosen. We applied and got in. So they brought us up to New York City, me and 50 nonprofits. And we were all sitting at a table, and we were all going around introducing ourselves. And we all had to say our name, our program, and who funds us. I haven't had this feeling since like 5th grade at the Hebrew Academy in Atlanta. We're going around and I'm embarrassed. It's like my feeling when I knew I didn't know do my homework, and we were coming around, our teacher would go around and you had to either read, and my Hebrew reading was not that good, or give an answer to homework, and I didn't do it. We were going around saying our funding, and I knew I was doing this wrong in my head because I had no foundational funding. So I did what I did in 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade. When it's got near me, I got up and left the table and went out to use the bathroom. And I was going to wait until they got past me and then slide back in. And I did exactly that. Nothing is more dehumanizing or makes you feel like you're back in 12 years old, 10 years old, and pulling off something like that. So I sit back down, and somebody at the end goes, "Hey, you didn't go." I was like, oh man. Okay. I said, all right, I know I'm doing this wrong. Let me just get it out there. My name is Billy. I created Etgar 36. This is what it is. And I have no funding. I am program derived funding. We make it all off our programming income. Luckily, somebody had the decency to come up to me, because we probably, let's be honest at this table, our work environment in total sometimes can be pretty toxic. It can be very backstabbing, not supportive of each other. Luckily, this person came up to me and said, "Do you not think that we would rather be where you are than having to sell our souls to our funders?" I mean, I'll be honest with y'all. I've had people on a civil rights trip that got funded by a family or foundation that's really into pet, taking care of animals, where we've had to, in the middle of a civil rights trip, go to a a PETA office and hear about how to work with animals. I mean, because they got money from this family. So I am so thankful that that person did that. And to this day, 18, 19 years down the road, actually, we just got our first foundation funding 2 weeks ago, the Arthur Blank. Sandy, I appreciate that. I wish he was spent the money on our football team a little bit after our disastrous loss to the Cowboys. But uh, it had to come with no strings attached. You know, success allows you to do a lot of things. And one is, I'm going to be very particular of where I will take money, politically and socially. I think we can set some tones here. So that's Etgar 36. We run a summer program, and when we're traveling, 50 to 55 summer trips. I'll be very honest with y'all. Now that I've talked about fundraising, I've been very blessed in that, and fortunate, that we've had 17 good years, sort of the story of Joseph's dreams. We're weathering this. We'll weather this. Okay. I'm fine to not do any trips until next summer. If we don't do next summer's trip, it's going to be more about, well, when are we ever really going to be up and running again? Maybe it's time to think about something else. But I'm able to keep my full-time staff on and hold out and do what we want to do. We're not doing everything. Everybody, we're not panicking here. We're doing talks online to groups, but it fits into who we are and what we're doing. It allows me to actually keep in touch with groups who usually do trips with us. But that's what thinking bigger and differently can be. We don't have to do it the same way. Create your own path. As Willy Wonka, the great youth worker philosopher, said, we are the music makers and we are the dreamers of dreams. Just have a vision. It does not have to be the same old youth group. Please, let's update it. It would be a blessing if we could bring the youth groups into the 1990s now, much less the 2020s. Like, it is time to think differently. Have a vision. We are stopping the students in their tracks. As I tell and beg my staff, we are giving them a whole new paradigm of how to think about the world. I tell my summer staff, we are teaching them as much about life by making sure that they are respectful in a restaurant as we are when we're sitting there with Jewish texts. How they respond to the wait staff or the other people in the movie theater who have paid money to see a movie and really don't want obnoxious kids trying to out obnoxious each other to be cool enough. That is a lesson way beyond what Hillel and Shammai could teach, or it actually is what Hillel and Shammai are teaching us. And so let's have the vision of what is the world we're trying to create, and can we create it through the kids? And I have two more quotes, and I would love just to open it up here, because I know I just took up way more time than I thought I was going to, but it's my favorite topic, me. One is, well, these are my two favorite musicians. One is the Grateful Dead. And my trip is nothing more than a reaction to when Jerry Garcia died. How do I keep traveling? Because I used to follow the Grateful Dead around. And the quote is this: "The storyteller makes no choice. Soon you will not hear his voice. His job is to shed light, not to master it." Right? So I just said we're trying to show the kids a new paradigm, but it's got to be their paradigm. It's not mine. So, like, success on Etgar 36 is not that every kid thinks the way I do about things. It's just that they think. So success has to be that a kid would sell their soul to get Joe Biden to win or Donald Trump to win. Either one is success. Now, I have personal ideas about it, but that doesn't matter. The goal of the program is that they think and come up with their own voice, not mine, their voice. So with that quote, just stay true to your vision and what you're trying to do in light of the pressure of your kids. I mean, we're giving them a whole new vocabulary of life. And so the other person I really like, follow, and learn from tremendously. I mean, I've talked to my accountant if going to his concerts could be a business write-off for business development, and that's Bruce Springsteen. And he has a great quote when he's talking about his audience and how he chooses to do his set list during his concerts. He says this: you can't conform to the formula of always giving the audience what it wants, or you are killing yourself and you're killing the audience, because they don't really want it either. Just because they respond to something doesn't mean they want it. I think it has come to the point where they respond automatically to things that they think they should respond to. You've got to give them more than that. Someone has to take the initiative and say, let's step out of the mold. Let's try this. When I read that in one of the books about him, I was like, this is the philosophy right here. All too often, kids are going to be as cliched as ever. You know, they're going to react in the way they think they want to. I remember as a kid, I'm sitting there mouthing off what I think I should be saying as a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old. But just beneath that, I'm like, I don't want that. I actually wouldn't mind having a discussion. I wouldn't mind you telling us to sit down and shut up. I wouldn't mind, you know, not having to yell at women this way. But I was doing what I thought the cliched stereotype was, as most kids do. And all too often, I think we, and by pressure from parents and other, God bless you, and other non-creative educators, under their pressure, we are told, give the kids what they want. And I'm sitting here saying, I got to tell you, I hate the quote that we use with our kids all the time, which is, more than from my teachers, I learn more from my kids. My answer to you is, then why am I not hiring the kid? Why would I hire you? If you're learning more from your kids, that's who I want to hire. It's not going to be you. I get the sentiment. I learn from kids too. But in reality, you're the teacher. We are the teachers. There's a job we're trying to do. Just by virtue of experience and education, we can see a little further down the road. They're a few miles behind us. So there's a great Native American saying, to know the road ahead, ask those walking back. That's what they're doing with us. So no, I don't profess that kids are brilliant and can teach me everything. I think I can teach them more. But that's just because of education. That's just because of experience. Experiential education, if you would. And so I will use everything in my means, movies, music. I mean, in the 80s, when I was talking about this, I was considered such a, I don't know what I was considered, but it wasn't good, of somebody who just wasn't using the Torah or the Talmud or the age-old quotes from Pirkei Avot, but that I was using Springsteen quotes. I was using Peter Himmelman quotes. I was using anybody and everybody's, anything that influenced me made it into what I was doing with the kids. I could watch, I don't know if it's on anymore, the TV show Inside the Actors Studio, where they would talk to actors about their craft. To me, I was like, why don't we have this for youth workers? Why don't we have this show? We're sort of doing this right now, but why don't we have this? We should be talking to each other. We should be learning from each other. And I think we're too scared to actually take this seriously or demand that it be taken seriously. And I want to wrap up with this. So the point I just made, let me be clear, was use anything and everything is good to be used. I mean, I would have a discussion with a friend. It would end up in that weekend's discussion with the kids. Anything and everything, plays, music, art, literature, anything, Christianity, I mean, anything should and could be used to influence you and work with your kids. We're in a battle to change the culture of this world and America. Another a book that really transformed my youth work when it came out was written by then Chicago Bulls coach Phil Jackson. It's called Sacred Hoops, and it came out in the 90s during their first three-peat run. And he is a Renaissance man, a Renaissance coach, because he would use Zen and Buddhist philosophy. He would give his athletes books to read when they would go on road trips. I mean, he was upping their game, making demands of them. And Phil Jackson spoke about this concept called invisible leadership. And to me, this is where I wanted to be. He talked about once where he would spend time in preseason going over a play that would happen only if there was like 2 seconds left and you were inbounding the ball in a situation. They would run it in preseason practice. And he said one of the highlights of his coaching career was all the way at the other end of the season, the championship game, they were down to 2 seconds and behind. And the players ran the play. He didn't have to say it. They scored and won. And the line that killed me was this. He goes, and I was exactly where I needed to be, on the sideline watching. And so that's invisible leadership. My goal was always to find a way inside the kids' heads and hearts, probably even more importantly, the heart, so that when I'm not there, I've going back to the Grateful Dead quote, I've shed the light. I didn't master it. I didn't tell them what they had to do, but they made their decisions based on a lot of what we've talked about. And that's powerful to me, at least. That's really what I got. I don't know. I would love to hear thoughts, questions, comments, discussion, whatever. It can be the difficult conversation. Disagree all you want. 30 some odd years in this field, I've been disagreed with. Plenty. So I want to thank y'all for letting me come and just throw out these ideas.
Thank you, Billy. Questions? Comments?
I have a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could give you $1 million, but unfortunately I can't.
I'll take a little less.
I wanted to ask you spoke about in the beginning of your career, how you just thought it would be a year, temporary sort of thing, just get it out of your system. I relate to that a lot. I wanted to know sort of if there was a particular moment or shift where you saw this more as a lifelong career, or if it just kind of happened that way.
So like so much of just right after college and that part of my life, and I just put up my website and email address. Love to keep the conversation going. I was living two different ideas, which is one was, this will be 2 years. I was sort of saying that. I was having a conversation in my own head between the two parts of me. The one who wanted to be the Wall Street, more traditional masculine job role. This is 1989. Males in, I look at Matt and Adam and many other males who go into this field, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing that it's so accepted. In the 80s, it was not, and it was not a viable career path. In fact, so much so, speaking about a theme that keeps coming out, when I would go to parties, I was 22, we'd get together with other friends. Nothing made me feel more uneasy than when it was like, what do you do? And I'm like, okay, here's what I do. I got to be honest with you. I would sometimes just tell people I'm in advertising. I just, I was avoiding it. And I get that this doesn't sound right in 2020. That's phenomenal that we moved past it where, all my friends were lawyers, accountants, doing the respectable thing. And I got to say this for anybody who understands what I'm talking about. For the first 5 years, my choice was ridiculed a little bit. But boy, when they all burnt out and I figured out 90% of my friends hated their career and I loved it, I was like, who's winning now? And then it became at parties. I was like, please ask me what I do because it's way more interesting than what you do. And so, that shift. But Sarah, I would say this, a lot of it was internal, much more internal. So I sort of always knew that this is what I liked, but what helped a lot was being respected by my employers as well. So for example, when the Washington, D.C. synagogue wanted to re-sign me, they signed me for 1 year. When they wanted to re-sign me, the president of the synagogue took me to a fancy club in Georgetown to have lunch to talk about it. Part of it was to go back to school as well. I'm not a student, so it wasn't a draw, but now I look back, I'm like, well, that was respecting me. So, I mean, it was being respected like that. In Atlanta, the president of the synagogue had lunch with me monthly. I mean, I was spoiled by a lot of congregations, and I was getting 8 to 9 to 10% raises every time. Like I remember being at a conservative movement youth director retreat, and we were talking about contracts, and somebody said that I shouldn't be allowed to talk because I was getting, 10%. And I said to them, I was like, why aren't you getting it? By the way, when you are accepting less, you're screwing me over. You're screwing everybody over because you're giving into the mentality that we're not that important. Please show me the rabbi who's going to accept less than they want, less than they think they're worth. And I will tell you, the rabbi in Atlanta told me, he goes, you're the kid's rabbi. I'm not. He goes, I'm 60, 70 years old. The only way I connect to them is through you. And so I started to look at myself differently. And I'm like, I'm as valuable a player here as anybody else, probably more so because more families stay in synagogues because the kids are happy. It's not because of the sermons, So I just went a long way from your question, but it's treating yourself like the rock star that you think you should be and making them treat you like the rock star. I can't stand hearing from our colleagues, and I get the dilemma. It's not them. Well, I shouldn't say it's not them that I don't blame, but not in total. The ones that say, well, our synagogue's poor, so I really shouldn't expect a raise. I was like, please, your rabbi said that too in the negotiations. I would love to have heard that. So, demand what you're worth. So Sarah, I don't think there was a point where I was like, this is what I want to do. I knew in my head this is what I wanted to do. It was me more coming to terms with it. And I think when I moved from the first job to the second job, but also as kids graduated and I could see the impact and I could see my programming ideas start to come through, I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Billy, I want to add on to that question. One of the things that we talked about 2 summers ago now at our first J-Teen conference in Houston was how J-Teen may be able to help youth professionals elevate the field. And that so often when somebody says, I'm a youth director, I'm, whatever in this role, it's like, oh, that must be a stepping stone to get to the next job. Like that's not a real job. That's right. Just to get us to the next job.
Right.
So how do we begin to transform? And it seems like it should have happened a real long time ago. But how do we begin to transform the idea that this is actually work? This is a job. This isn't a stepping stone. These are careers that have real worth and real value and should be respected.
Right. I'm just writing down notes because I forget within 5 seconds. Okay. First and foremost, you got to be good at the job. If you're crappy at the job, then it is a crappy job. You've got to bring the goods to demand the goods. So you got to be good at it. You got to have the vision. You got to show your worth. Parents whose kids are in your program understand your worth and understand the job. I'm not married, never been married, never want to be married. This job was great for that, for birth control and all of that. So I had the flexibility of walking away, and saying, I'm gone. Um, you know, to be real, when after 3 years in DC, when Atlanta came calling, I went to the people in DC and said, I'm getting calls from Atlanta. In my vision, in my head, this was the time when, if you've seen the movie The Firm, it had just come out. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have all this happening. I'm going to have, corporations battling with each other. Uh, the synagogue said, well, what do you want us to do? And I was thinking, well, all right, you've said your piece, so I'm going to go elsewhere. First bring the goods. You got to be good at what you do. Then demand the goods, and you got to hold firm. You got to be able to walk away, if need be. All too often, I hear from our own colleagues, I want to leave, but the kids. That's all great, but they leave, by the way. The kids leave, and you're still there. I think that's a noble and nice sentiment, but be ready to be a doormat then, because people understand they got you. This is why teachers don't get, it's the same argument that teachers get too, of, behind the scenes. They're not going to walk away. They're teachers. They're going to stay for the kids. There are kids in other synagogues too, that will pay more. Pay you more and treat you better. It's not all about pay, by the way. It is in America a symbol for how you are respected, though. But so on one hand, you got to be selfless for the kids. In the other hand, you got to be selfless for you. You got to be selfish for you. And you got to demand it, perform it, demand it, and also sell it. When somebody says that's a cute job, or that must be fun to just take kids to sporting events, you gotta be like, no, this is what I do. There's that on YouTube, there's that poet, spoken word poet, Taylor Molly, who talks about what a teacher makes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, as soon as we hang up, Google it. You'll be in tears watching it for the rest of your day, then inspired by it. You got to sell yourself and demand your place at the table within your synagogue, within, or wherever you work. I'm sitting here saying synagogue, whatever organization you work at. The kids should not be an afterthought. View it as you are the link to the future financial well-being of any organization you're at. The people in their 70s and 80s, of course, they're the ones who are financially stable right now, and everything's being named after. They're not going to be there long, right? You're the future. When everybody is so scared about their future of the organizations, you're handing it to them on a platter. So then understand it. This fits into a lot of stuff I was saying, but I want to make sure I say it. One of the really important things when I started Etgar, but it really happened when I was a youth director, and it fits into what you're saying now too. And I was joking about it with Leanne, but it's as important to know what you're not as it is what you are. And so you got to know when to say no. I mean, when you're starting a nonprofit and somebody's throwing money at you to do something, it's really hard to say no. But there are times where I knew that wasn't going to be the direction I needed to go. I don't need to be, they would say, we get you're doing this trip. Why don't, if I paid you this much money, could you do this trip? I was like, it's not where I want to be. So it's really important to know who you are, but equally important to know what you're not. And also what your youth are going to do, what your program is going to be. And think of it as a program rather than just a youth group. A youth group, they could get together and do something. That's a group. A program is this individual program fits into this event, into this event, into this event, so that as a whole, you're seeing an entire program. And that's when I was talking about asking the why. Why are you doing this event? And so how does this event fit into the entire program? And by the way, just having fun is an answer. God knows every kid in my youth group would tell you, yeah, fun was probably far down on my list of importance to them, or feeding them. Actually, I would forget to do that. But so all of that is how we elevate this. But it's you constantly selling it too. You got to sell yourself and the field, and demand better from your colleagues.
Amazing. Thank you, sir. I appreciate going on this journey with you. I know for those of you who know you, they also know this is not your normal talk. And I was really excited to be able to give you the opportunity and the platform to really showcase who you are and what's behind the incredible organization that you have created.
I appreciate it. It was fun. I do need to be pushed here and there. So I do appreciate it. I love talking to colleagues about the crafts here.
Wonderful. Well, you have put your email, you put your website. So if you all have any questions or anything you want to follow up with, I know that he is available. He's also on Facebook and really, really interesting. So
if you, yeah, I guess I don't know if I weren't me, if I would consider me interesting on Facebook. It's a lot as we're getting towards November, but
exactly.
I appreciate it.
But thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for participating. And next month, we don't have the date solidified yet, but we are bringing on the young women who wrote the E-Jewish Philanthropy article on youth group hookup culture. So they're going to be presenting to us. Billy, you may want to join us for this one.
I just find it interesting because, I mean, I don't think we publicly will say it, but at some point, that is what the point is. At some point, I mean, and I see both sides. I see both sides, but it's fascinating.
And they're going to speak to both sides. One of them is a high school student, and the other 5 are college students. So they're, just in or right outside of our current communities. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see y'all very soon. Have an easy fast if you're fasting. And I guess we should have started off with Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Take care, everybody.
Shana Tova. Thank you.
Thank you.